Welcome to Your Own Deep Dive. This time we're exploring habits, and specifically James Clear's atomic habits. So you want to get the most out of his ideas about how they work, why they matter, and how you can use them to your advantage.
Exactly. So we're going to be looking at the core principles, the stuff that's both surprising and actually useful, and then we'll connect it back to how you can use this stuff.
Yeah, think of this like your cheat sheet for making the most of your habits. We're going to cover it all from the 4 laws he talks about to why your identity is important and the power of small wins.
Oh, and even why missing a habit once doesn't have to derail the whole thing.
And there's a lot of really fascinating stuff along the way.
Like why people playing slot machines will spin like 600 times an hour, spoiler alert. Dopamine.
That makes sense.
And how it just changing a simple cash register in the 1800s basically eliminated employee theft.
Huh. So how do these seemingly small things add up to such big results?
Well, Clear introduces this really interesting idea called the plateau of latent potential. Imagine you're heating an ice cube. For a while, nothing seems to be happening, right? You're putting in the effort, but no visible change.
Right.
Then, bam, you hit a certain temperature and suddenly it melts rapidly. It's like all that effort was kind of hidden until you hit a tipping point.
So it's like our efforts might be accumulating even if we don't see the impact right away.
Exactly. It's easy to get discouraged when we don't see those immediate results. We might even give up.
Right, like it feels like it's not working.
But those small, consistent actions, those are what lay the groundwork for those big breakthroughs.
It reminds me of the saying, trust the process.
Absolutely. And that brings us to another key concept Clear highlights: identity-based habits. He argues that truly lasting habits are tied to our sense of self.
It's not just about what we do, it's about who we believe we are.
Precisely. It's that classic, I'm the type of person who statement. Let's say someone wants to save money, but they see themselves as a spender.
Their actions will likely reflect that belief, even if it's not what they consciously desire.
Exactly. Their habits are unconsciously aligning with their self-image.
So, to change our habits for good, we need to address those underlying beliefs about ourselves.
Right. And that's where the 4 laws of behavior change come in.
Now, I'm really curious about these laws. What are they all about?
Well, they provide a framework for making habits stick. And the basic principles, without getting into too much detail right now, are to make the desired habit obvious, attractive, easy, and satisfying.
Seems pretty practical. Is that why they seem to resonate with people?
Probably. I mean, they offer a tangible roadmap for change, not just like vague advice.
Right. It's not just like be better. It's like, okay, here are the steps.
Yeah. Plus, he gives you a bunch of concrete strategies for putting each of these laws into action.
Now, one of the strategies I thought was super interesting was temptation bundling, where you combine something you need to do with something you want to do.
Ah, yeah. It's a clever way to kind of hack your brain's reward system. Like you only allow yourself to watch your favorite show while you're working out.
Oh, that's a good example, yeah. And it ties back to the 4-step habit loop he talks about, right?
Exactly. The cue, the craving, the response, and the reward. Like seeing your phone light up, that's your cue. It triggers a craving to, check those notifications. Picking up your phone, that's the response. And then, bam, the reward, that hit of dopamine from seeing those notifications.
Kind of scary how predictable our brains can be sometimes.
Yeah, sometimes. But understanding this loop, it's like it gives you back control, right?
Definitely. I mean, if you don't know the rules of the game, you can't play it well.
And another powerful influence on our behavior is, well, our surrounding.
Our environment.
Yeah, exactly. And Clear argues that it shapes our habits way more than we realize.
It reminds me of the story about the Vietnam War veterans who were addicted to heroin but easily broke the habit when they came home.
Such a powerful example. It illustrates how deeply our cravings are tied to the cues in our environment. In Vietnam, there was stress, easy access to drugs, everyone around them was using. But back home, all those cues were gone.
And their habits changed without them even, consciously trying.
It's pretty incredible, and it shows that optimizing your environment, it's one of the best ways to build good habits.
So instead of just relying on willpower, we should focus on strategically setting ourselves up for success.
Yeah, make those good habits easier and those bad habits harder. If you're surrounded by junk food, well, good luck resisting it.
So it's about removing those temptations and making those good choices the obvious, easy choice.
Precisely. And Clear gives a ton of practical tips for doing that, for your home, for your work, even for your digital spaces.
This is where the idea of motivation rituals and the 2-minute rule comes in.
You got it. So, motivation rituals are about linking something enjoyable with a habit that's tough for you, like listening to your favorite music while you're working out. Oh, yeah, I do that, like tricking your brain into looking forward to it.
Yeah, exactly. And then there's the 2-minute rule. The idea is to break those daunting habits into teeny tiny versions that are easy to start. Like instead of write a novel, it becomes write for 2 minutes.
Seems almost too simple, but I get it. Like, just getting started is often the hardest part.
Totally. Once you overcome that inertia, you're more likely to keep going.
Makes sense. So, we've talked about making those habits obvious, attractive, and easy. But what about making them satisfying, which Clear says is crucial for making them stick?
Well, one of the best ways is habit tracking. Remember that story about the salesman who would move paper clips to track his calls?
Oh, yeah. I love that story. Seems a bit silly, but it's so powerful. Each paperclip was like a visual reminder of his progress.
It's like you're making that invisible progress visible, right?
Totally.
And it provides that feeling of accomplishment, which reinforces the habit loop and makes you want to continue.
Right, right. Clear also talks about having an accountability partner, right? Oh, absolutely. It's like having a cheerleader in your corner, someone to keep you motivated and on track.
This is where the idea of a habit contract comes in. You formalize that commitment.
Yeah. It adds that extra layer of social pressure, which can be surprisingly effective.
Absolutely. But Clear also talks about the importance of finding your own unique advantage.
Oh, yeah. That's where the explore-exploit trade-off comes in. Balancing exploration, like trying new things to see what you're good at, with exploitation, which is focusing on and maximizing your strengths once you've found them. Like, think about Michael Phelps. His body type, it made him, well, like uniquely suited for swimming.
So we're all kind of wired differently, and it's about finding what we excel at and building habits that support those natural abilities.
Precisely. We don't all have to follow the same path. The key is finding what works for you.
So instead of battling our weaknesses all the time, it's about figuring out what we're good at and maximizing that.
Right. Play to your strengths. But even when we've got our habits dialed in and we're firing on all cylinders, there are going to be days when motivation just dips, right?
Oh, absolutely. It happens to all of us. We're human, not robots.
Right. Clear emphasizes the importance of showing up, even when you don't feel like it. There's a story he shares about a coach who said, the difference between professionals and amateurs. Professionals show up even when they don't want to.
It's about discipline, not just motivation.
Totally. And even if you can't do a full workout or write for hours, Clear says even 5 minutes is better than nothing. It keeps that habit alive, right?
It's like a small victory, a vote for the person you're trying to become.
Exactly. And those small wins, they add up over time. And speaking of small wins, Clear also talks about the power of reflection.
I'm really curious about this. How does reflection fit into the whole habit-building equation?
Well, he encourages regularly reviewing your progress and figuring out where you can improve. He shares this fascinating story about the LA Lakers. They had this really detailed program called the Career Best Effort Program.
Sounds intense.
Yeah. They tracked all sorts of stats, even things like deflections and loose balls recovered. The point was to emphasize consistent effort and those incremental improvements.
It's like they were looking for those hidden wins that often get overlooked.
Exactly. And it's not just about those big wins. It's about those small, consistent actions that contribute to overall success.
It's about paying attention to the details and constantly seeking ways to improve.
Clear also highlights the habits of Olympic gold medalist Katie Ledecky. She's incredibly meticulous about tracking her performance data and identifying even the smallest areas for improvement.
So it's not just about talent. It's about that relentless pursuit of excellence.
Totally. But reflection isn't just about crunching numbers. It's also about taking a step back and asking yourself those tough questions like, what went well? What could I have done better? What adjustments can I make? It's about turning setbacks into learning experiences.
It's about embracing that growth mindset and using those mistakes as fuel for improvement.
Precisely. Now, this deep dive has already given us a lot to chew on, but before we move on, I think it's important to touch on the deeper psychology of habits. Clear talks about the difference between wanting and liking and the powerful role dopamine plays in our behavior.
Yeah, okay, that's where it gets really interesting to me because it comes back to how our brains are actually wired. Right?
Yeah. So, like, We evolved in a world where immediate rewards were essential for survival. But in
Mhm.
today's world, that often leads us to prioritize instant gratification over, those long-term benefits.
So we're drawn to habits that offer that quick dopamine hit, even if they're not good for us in the long run.
Yeah, exactly. It's like eating junk food, scrolling social media, binge watching Netflix.
They offer that quick reward, but often leave us feeling, well, kind of crappy afterward.
Right. It's that classic struggle between short-term pleasure and long-term well-being. And that's why Clear emphasizes the importance of making good habits as satisfying as possible. It's not just about willpower, it's about understanding how to, hack your own reward system.
Okay, so how do we make those delayed returns, those long-term benefits, more appealing to our uh, dopamine-driven brains?
Well, there are a few strategies he suggests. One is to focus on the inherent rewards of the habit itself.
Mm.
Like, if you're trying to build the habit of exercising, don't focus on, say, weight loss as the goal. Instead, try to find enjoyment in the movement and the feeling of getting stronger.
Yeah, that makes sense. Focus on the experience itself.
Right. And another strategy is to build in those small rewards along the way. You could listen to your favorite music while you work out, or you could, I don't know, treat yourself to a healthy snack after a productive work session.
It's about finding those little ways to boost that sense of satisfaction and make those good habits feel more rewarding in the moment.
Exactly. And he reminds us that real change, it takes time and consistency. We've got to be patient and focus on building those atomic habits that will compound over time.
Right. It's about those small wins accumulating and leading to those big long-term results.
And speaking of small wins, there's another really interesting concept. He introduces the Goldilocks rule.
The Goldilocks rule. I'm intrigued.
Remember the story of Goldilocks and the three bears? She wanted the porridge that was just right.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Not too hot, not too cold.
Well, the Goldilocks rule suggests that we're most motivated when we're working on tasks that are right on the edge of our current abilities. Not too easy, not too hard, just challenging enough.
It's like that sweet spot where we're pushing ourselves, but not to the point of frustration.
Exactly. He even connects it to the idea of flow state. Those moments when you're completely absorbed in what you're doing and time seems to fly by.
Yeah, I love those moments.
Me too. Well, those flow states often happen when we're operating within this Goldilocks zone.
So how do we actually apply this rule to our habit-building efforts?
Well, it starts with honestly assessing your skill level and choosing habits that are challenging but not overwhelming. And as you progress, you keep raising the bar, always striving to stay within that Goldilocks zone.
So it's an ongoing process of calibration, always adjusting the difficulty to make sure it's stimulating but not discouraging.
Exactly. He gives the example of learning to play tennis. If you start playing against someone way better than you, you'll likely get crushed and feel demotivated. But if you play against someone at your level or maybe a little bit below,
You'll have a better chance of winning, and that feeling of success will keep you coming back for more.
you got it. And this applies to all sorts of things, from learning a new language to starting a business. It's about breaking down that big goal into smaller steps and then gradually increasing the challenge as you gain confidence.
It reminds me of the advice to focus on the process, not the outcome.
Yes, it's not about instant perfection. It's about those consistent, incremental improvements made within that sweet spot of challenge.
So we've got that Goldilocks zone figured out. But what about those times when motivation just plummets, even when we've got the right level of challenge? What does Clear suggest for those moments when willpower feels, well, kind of weak?
Well, he really stresses the importance of showing up, even when you don't want to. There's this story he shares about a coach who said, the difference between professionals and amateurs. Professionals show up even when they're not feeling it.
It's discipline over motivation.
Absolutely. And even if you can't do a full workout or a long writing session, even just 5 minutes, it's better than nothing.
Right. It keeps that momentum going.
And it reinforces that identity we were talking about earlier. Like
Mhm.
it's a signal to yourself. This is who I am. This is what I do. And he also suggests having a plan for those low motivation moments. Maybe a shorter workout or an easier task list.
It's like having a backup plan for when willpower fails us.
Exactly. And remember, it's okay to have those off days. Be kind to yourself. We're all human.
I think that's an important reminder, especially in today's world where we're constantly bombarded with messages about hustle and productivity.
It's about finding that balance between pushing ourselves and being compassionate with ourselves.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on the mechanics of habit formation. But Kalira also delves into the deeper why behind our habits.
Yeah, he talks about the importance of aligning our habits with our values.
That seems pretty fundamental. Could you elaborate on that a bit?
It's about taking a step back and asking, what do I truly value in life,
Yeah.
What are those guiding principles that shape who I am and how I want to live? And then using those values as a guide for choosing the habits that we want to cultivate.
So it's about making sure our actions are actually reflecting those core beliefs.
Exactly. Like, imagine a parent who values spending time with their kids. If they're always working late or glued to their phone, their actions aren't really aligning with that value, right?
It's about closing that gap between our aspirations and our actual behavior.
And when our habits and values are aligned, there's a sense of harmony. It feels good. And it's easier to stick with those habits because they feel authentic to who we are.
Yeah. It's about creating a life that feels true to ourselves, not just chasing some external measure of success.
Right. And to help us understand why it can be so tough to prioritize those long-term goals, Clear talks about the concept of delayed return environments.
Delayed return environments, that sounds intriguing. What exactly does that mean?
Well, he points out that the modern world is full of temptations that offer immediate gratification, while good habits often have those delayed rewards. Think about it. Eating a donut feels good right away, but the benefits of exercise, those take time to show up.
So our brains, which are wired for that instant pleasure, are constantly being pulled towards those quick rewards, even if they're not good for us in the long run.
That's the struggle, right? It's a mismatch between our ancient wiring and our modern environment.
Well, how do we navigate that? How do we make those delayed returns, those long-term rewards, more appealing to our, well, dopamine-seeking brains?
Well, Clear offers a few strategies. One is to find ways to add a little bit of immediate satisfaction to those good habits. Like we were talking about before, rewarding yourself with a healthy snack after a workout, or listening to your favorite music while you're cleaning.
So like those little bursts of pleasure can make those good habits feel a bit more rewarding in the moment.
Right. And another strategy is to try to make the consequences of bad habits feel more immediate.
So like really picturing those yellow teeth and that hacking cough if I continue to smoke.
Exactly. By bringing those negative consequences into the present moment, the bad habit becomes a lot less appealing.
It's like we're playing mental judo, using our own minds against those bad habits. This has been such a fascinating deep dive, and we've only just scratched the surface.
Right. And as we transition to the next part of our exploration, I think the one key message from Atomic Habits I want to leave our listener with is this. We're not fixed, we're fluid. We have the power to change, to evolve, to become the architects of our own lives. And it all starts with those small atomic changes consistently applied.
Beautifully said. And to our listener out there, remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about progress. Each small win is a vote for the person you want to become.
So we've talked a lot about building good habits, but let's talk about breaking bad ones. Feels like a whole different challenge, right?
It does. I mean, we all have those habits that we could just, I don't know, snap our fingers and make disappear.
I hear you. But remember we were talking about the power of our environment. Well, Clear suggests that one way to break a bad habit is to make the cue for that habit invisible.
Like hiding those tempting snacks in the back of the cupboard where I'm less likely to see them.
Exactly. It's about making it harder to indulge in the bad habit.
So if I have to actually make an effort to, dig those snacks out, I'm more likely to stop and think twice.
And that pause, that can be all you need. He tells a story in the book about how he was trying to break his social media addiction.
Okay, yeah.
He had his assistant change all his passwords every Monday, and she wouldn't give him the new ones until Friday.
Oh, wow. So no social media during the week.
Exactly. He was basically going cold turkey, and he found it incredibly effective.
That's a pretty extreme example.
Yeah.
But I can see how it would work. You're literally removing the temptation.
Yeah.
But what about those habits that are harder to completely avoid, like, overeating or procrastination?
Well, for those, he recommends what he calls commitment devices. It's about intentionally creating obstacles that make it harder to indulge in those bad habits.
Oh, this reminds me of that story about Victor Hugo. He locked away all his clothes except for a shawl so he couldn't leave the house and could focus on writing.
That's exactly it. Pretty extreme, I know. But there are lots of ways to apply this principle in real life. Like, if you want to eat less, you could buy those single-serving packs of food instead of the bulk size. Or if you're prone to impulse buys online, you could remove your credit card info from their shopping sites.
So it's like you're creating these little speed bumps that make it just a bit more inconvenient to give in.
Yep. And that tiny bit of friction can make a big difference, surprisingly. We've talked about making bad habits inevitable and difficult, But Clear also highlights the power of reframing how we think about them. He calls it inverting the second law of behavior change.
So instead of trying to make the bad habit less attractive, we try to make it unattractive.
You got it. He uses smoking as an example. Instead of focusing on those long-term health risks, which can feel far off, he suggests focusing on the immediate consequences. Think bad breath, yellow teeth, that lingering smell of smoke.
Right. Make those negative consequences feel more real and immediate.
Exactly. And this applies to other bad habits too. Like if you want to stop procrastinating, focus on the stress of waiting till the last minute.
So instead of seeing it as, just a quirky personality trait, face the reality of how it's actually affecting your life.
Exactly. We've got to be honest with ourselves about the cost of those bad habits. So we've talked about making them invisible, difficult, and unattractive. But let's be real, we're all going to slip up sometimes. What does Clear suggest for when that happens?
Yeah, that's the part I struggle with.
He's got a great phrase, never miss twice. A single slip-up doesn't mean you've failed. The key is to get back on track as quickly as possible.
It's so easy to just give up after one mistake.
Yeah.
Like, well, I messed up, so might as well just quit.
I know, so common. But Clear says the more we practice a habit, the easier it becomes to get back on track.
Yeah, I can see that. It's like muscle memory for our good habits.
Yeah.
The more we do it, the easier it becomes to bounce back.
Exactly. It's not about perfection, it's about progress. Those slip-ups are part of the journey.
Okay. So any final thoughts on breaking those bad habits?
Just remember, breaking a bad habit, it's a process, not some event. You need time, patience, got to be kind to yourself, experiment with different things, see what works for you.
Like the explore exploit thing. Try new things, learn from your mistakes, keep refining your approach.
Exactly. And celebrate those little wins. Every time you resist that temptation, you're reinforcing those good habits.
Like casting a vote for the person you want to become. And eventually those votes add up and start to really shift your identity. Speaking of identity, this is where things get really interesting. Clear digs into how much our beliefs about ourselves affect our ability to change.
It all comes back to that I'm the type of person who statement. Our habits, they're expressions of our identity.
So if we want to change our habits, we've got to start with changing how we see ourselves.
That's it. He uses the example of someone trying to quit smoking. If they see themselves as a smoker, they're going to keep acting like one, even if they consciously want to quit.
Yeah, it's like those underlying beliefs are driving the bus, even when we don't realize it.
Right. But if they can shift their identity to that of a non-smoker, their behavior naturally starts to change.
It's about aligning our actions with who we want to be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, but how do we actually change those deeply ingrained beliefs about ourselves?
That's the tough part, right? Well, Clear suggests a few things, and one of the most effective is to focus on those small wins. Remember that story about the salesman moving paper clips to track his calls?
Yeah.
Each paperclip, it wasn't just a measure of progress. It was a vote for the identity he was creating, a successful, consistent salesman.
It's like those small actions. They chip away at the old self-image and start to build a new one.
And it's not just our actions, it's how we talk to ourselves, too. If you're always putting yourself down, you're just reinforcing that negative self-image.
Right, it's like we're our own worst critics sometimes.
We've got to become aware of that negative self-talk and start to challenge it.
Instead of focusing on what we're not, focus on what we are. What are our strengths, our values, our accomplishments?
Exactly. As you start to see yourself in a more positive light, your behavior will naturally follow suit.
It's like if you believe you're capable of change, you're more likely to actually make that change happen.
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And Clear says our identity is fluid, not fixed. We're always creating and recreating ourselves through our choices. We're not stuck with the self-image we have today.
That's incredibly empowering. It means we have the power to shape our own destiny.
Right. And it starts with those small atomic habits that, over time, transform how we see ourselves and create a ripple effect across every area of our lives.
So it's not just about changing our actions, it's about transforming who we are at our core.
And that transformation, it can have a huge impact on our well-being. Clear highlights this idea of flow state, that feeling of being completely absorbed in an activity.
Oh yeah, it's like you're in the zone, time flies by, you're just totally present.
Exactly. Well, research shows that people experience flow most often when they're engaged in activities that are challenging but not too overwhelming. Activities that require skill and focus, but also give that sense of accomplishment.
It's like finding that sweet spot where we're pushing ourselves, but not to the point of frustration.
And Clear argues that good habits can actually help us access those flow states more often. When we have those positive habits in place, we're more likely to engage in activities that, well, that challenge and fulfill us.
So it creates a cycle. Good habits lead to more flow, which leads to more happiness, which makes it easier to stick to those good habits.
Right. And on the flip side, those bad habits, those can lead to a downward spiral. Stress, anxiety, negativity. So it becomes even more important to be mindful about the habits we choose to cultivate. They shape not just our actions, but our thoughts, our emotions, our whole experience of life.
Yeah, we have way more control over our happiness than we often realize. And even those small, seemingly insignificant habits, they can have a huge impact,
And it's not just about our own happiness, it's about our collective well-being. Clear talks about how our habits can ripple outwards.
affecting our families, our communities, the world around us.
It's powerful stuff. Even those little acts of kindness, they can create a ripple effect of positivity.
Like, be the change you want to see in the world. Our habits are how we embody that change.
Beautifully said. And remember, it's not about being perfect. It's about progress. Each time we choose that positive action over the negative one, we're making a difference.
Okay, so this deep dive has given me so much to think about. Before we wrap things up, is there anything else from Atomic Habits you think is especially important for our listener?
Oh yeah, definitely. He talks about these delayed return environments and how they make it tough to prioritize good habits in today's world.
Delayed return environments.
Yeah.
Okay, remind me what those are again?
So basically, the modern world is full of temptations that offer instant gratification, right? But good habits, those often have delayed rewards. It's like that donut versus the exercise thing.
Right? Our brains want that quick hit of pleasure. But the things that really matter in life, those often take time and effort.
Exactly. So our challenge is to figure out how to bridge that gap. How do we make those delayed returns more appealing to our brains?
Okay, yeah. How do we do that?
Well, Clear offers a few strategies. One is to try to find ways to add a bit of immediate satisfaction to those good habits.
Oh, like we were talking about before, giving ourselves those small rewards along the way.
Right. And it's not just about adding pleasure to good habits, it's also about making those consequences of bad habits feel more immediate. Remember the habit contract.
Yeah, or even just vividly picturing those negative consequences.
That's it. If you can bring those negative consequences into the present moment, well, suddenly that bad habit becomes much less appealing.
Okay, that's a great tip.
It's like a mind game, right? You're
Mhm.
hacking your own brain to favor those long-term benefits. It takes practice, but it works.
This has been such a fascinating deep dive, but before we move on, Clear leaves us with this really interesting question, right?
He does. He asks, how can we design our lives to favor those delayed returns? What can we do today to set ourselves up for success tomorrow?
It's a great question. It makes you think about how you can be more intentional in shaping your own life.
Yeah, we have more power than we realize. And even small changes, consistently applied, they can make a big difference.
Absolutely. Now let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll have even more insights from Atomic Habits to help you optimize your habit-building journey. Okay, so we've covered a lot about the 4 laws of behavior change, the power of identity, the sneaky influence of our environment, and even like hacking our brains to make those long-term rewards more appealing. What other gems has James Clear hidden in Atomic Habits?
One theme that runs through the book is this idea of freedom.
Freedom.
Hmm.
I wouldn't immediately think of habits and freedom together. It almost feels like the opposite, Like you're kind of boxing yourself in with routines.
I get that. But think about it this way. Good habits, they free up our mental energy. You're not constantly fighting temptation or like making decisions about things that are already automatic.
Oh, okay. So it's like freeing up space in our brains for the stuff that really matters.
Yeah, exactly.
Reminds me of that cash register example. Once they put in that new system, the employees couldn't steal anymore, so they didn't even have to think about it.
Exactly. Their behavior was basically automated, right? So they could focus on other things. It's the same with our own habits. The more good habits we can kind of put on autopilot, the less willpower we need to use every day.
It's not just efficiency then. It's like reclaiming mental space for creativity, for joy, for the things that actually matter.
Yeah, that's it. It's a subtle kind of freedom. Freedom from distractions, freedom from those internal battles that drain our energy and keep us stuck.
I really like that perspective. It's like building good habits isn't just about achieving some external measure of success. It's about creating a life that feels, I don't know, more spacious and free.
And it's not just freedom from, it's also freedom to. The more good habits we have, the more capable we become, right? Like it opens up possibilities.
So those small improvements, they kind of create a ripple effect.
Precisely. Like, imagine you develop the habit of exercising regularly. Well, you're not just improving your physical health, you're boosting your energy, your confidence, your overall sense of well-being.
Right, and that can have a ripple effect in other areas of your life.
Exactly. You might have more energy to pursue a hobby, or you might feel more confident taking on a new challenge at work.
Each good habit becomes a stepping stone.
Clear emphasizes this idea throughout Atomic Habits. The real purpose of building better habits isn't just about some arbitrary goal. It's about becoming the best version of ourselves and creating a life that feels meaningful?
It's not just what you do, it's who you become.
Yeah, it's about that ongoing journey of growth and self-discovery.
And Atomic Habits offers a very practical roadmap for that journey. It's a reminder that we're not fixed, we're fluid, we have the power to change, and it all starts with those tiny habits, those atomic habits that gradually reshape how we see ourselves.
Beautifully said. And as we wrap up this deep dive, that's the message I want to leave our listener with. You're the architect of your own life. You have the power to choose the habits that will shape your future. So keep experimenting, keep reflecting, and keep building those atomic habits.
And to our listener out there, remember, it's not about being perfect, it's about making progress. Each small step, each positive choice you make brings you closer to the best version of yourself.